Hello everyone, Reza here. In this video, I will show you a technique through which we can export data from PowerApps by leveraging PowerAutomate. The data source can have large data purely because the query will be performed dynamically in PowerAutomate. And in Flow, we can get all that data, generate an HTML table, send it out in an email, create a CSV file with that data, convert it into a PDF, and a lot more. So let's check it out in action. I have a Power App, the home screen for which has a gallery that showcases data from a SharePoint list. The SharePoint list has over 2000 records. It is exceeding the delegation limit for PowerApps, which can be set to a maximum of 2000. The scenario here is to export data from PowerApps, and the data that will be exported should be dynamic in nature. The user can leverage the filters that are provided in PowerApps to further refine the data. So let's filter the data where the progress of the task is blocked. I've also showcased how many items are currently being held in this gallery. And here as well, I can further filter it down based on the priority. And if I click on export, this will call a PowerAutomate flow that will in turn go ahead and trigger the process of exporting that data and sending it out to the current logged in user in an email. The email that I have received contains all those 4 tasks that have the progress blocked and the priority critical. The data is exported in tabular format in rich HTML manner directly inside the email as a table. Plus, the data export has also been provided in a CSV format, and the data export has also been provided in PDF. PowerApps runs into a delegation challenge or a scenario in which your query is delegable, in which case a gallery will load data only in batches of 100. Let's filter the tasks where the progress is in progress and the priority, let's say, is high. Now, if you look at the gallery count, it's 100. The query is delegable against SharePoint. Now, if I scroll down to the 100th record, only then it will load the next 100. So if I try and export the data directly from my gallery, I would run into the scenario wherein my gallery may not have all the data loaded. Plus, if I load all the data in a collection in PowerApps, I would run into the delegation scenario. And if I do get data in PowerApps, let's say up to the delegable limit as well, which is 2000 max, to send all that data from PowerApps to Flow, there would be a performance bottleneck purely because PowerApps will have to transfer all that data to PowerAutomate. PowerAutomate will have to read all that information and then perform the export. In this scenario, if I hit export, I am actually performing the query dynamically inside of PowerAutomate and not in PowerApps. PowerApps is only sending the information of the query to be performed to PowerAutomate. In progress, priority high. If I look at the email that I have received for this, I have way more than 200 items. This actually includes the entire result set from my entire data source of 2000 plus items in SharePoint. The same thing is true for my CSV file that's exported. The same thing is true for my PDF file as well that gets generated. In my home screen, I have a gallery, the items property for which is my SharePoint list called Work Progress Tracker that is connected in my Power App. And this list has over 2000 records. Now, to provide options for the user to filter the data directly in Power Apps, let's say based on the title of the task, I will insert a text input control, set its default value to empty, and set the hint text to search for task title. I will add a label right above this called task title, and this text input control, I will rename it to txt task title. I would like to filter this gallery where the title of the task starts with the text that the user enters in this text box. Filter my data source, where I will use the starts with function. The text to be checked is from the title column in my SharePoint list, and the starting string is that text box controls text property. This completes my filter condition. If I preview the app, the text box is empty, so it's loading all the data from my data source. It's a delegable query, so it gets it in batches of 100. As I start typing in the text, it will start querying my entire data set to search for tasks, starting with that specific task title. And there are a total of 11 items in my entire data set that have that specific task title. However, if I search for task number 4, as you can see, the gallery is showing 100 items. That means there are more tasks where the title begins with task 4. Now in PowerApps, the user can see all the tasks by navigating through the entire data set in this gallery. However, if the user was to perform a query where the data is 100 and the user does not scroll to the bottom, how do I perform the export of all that data? And that's why the idea is to perform the actual export operation, the actual query operation in Power Automate, and not let PowerApps do all that work. Now to start a flow from PowerApps, make sure that you head over to Settings, go to Upcoming Features, search for Power Automate. There should be a feature called Power Automate pane. Make sure you enable this. This will give you an option in the left navigation for Power Automate. I can select that and I can click on Create New Flow. I will create a flow from blank. I will give this flow a name. I've called it Export Tasks. The trigger for this flow, go ahead and delete this. From the connectors, pick PowerApps and choose the PowerApps V2 trigger. This has a nice feature wherein we can add input parameters directly through the trigger action itself. I will add 2 parameters. The first one, type text. I will call this my query, the query that I want to perform in flow. And for the second input, I'll again pick type text. I will call it mail to. Who do you want to send the exported data to? I will add a new step and use the get items action from the SharePoint connector. Here I will connect to my SharePoint site and then pick my SharePoint list, which is work progress tracker. In here, under advanced options, we can add OData filter queries, which allows us to filter our data in SharePoint. I have done a full video on how to perform OData filter query on SharePoint lists or libraries for all column types. I will highly recommend you to watch that. I'll place the link for that video in the description of this video, so do check it out. Now the query that I am trying to perform here is the same query that I'm performing in my Power App, which is whether the title column starts with a text that the user entered in my Power App. And typically the way you would write it here is starts with title column, and then in single quotes, you'll put the text. And this will perform the filter query in SharePoint. Now bear in mind, if your list is large, the top count by default is 100. So make sure you plug this to 5,000. That's the threshold limit for a SharePoint list. And to ensure that it fetches all the data, make sure you go to Settings and turn on pagination. The number here as well, I will set it to 5,000. So this will perform the filter query for me directly in Flow. However, this query is what needs to be made dynamic, and it needs to come directly from my Power App. And that I would be passing as a parameter from Power App to Flow, and that parameter is called query. So instead of hard coding the query here, I will read the query from dynamic content and I will pick query input parameter from the Power Apps trigger. The next step is for me to create my HTML table that I would like to send out in an email. So for that, I will add a new step. search for HTML. There is a data operation action called create HTML table. So I will select this. The from property needs to be an array of data, and that I will get from dynamic content, the value property from the get items action. And this will give me all the items based upon that query from my SharePoint list. So I will select this. Under show advanced options, by default, the columns is set to automatic, meaning it will read all the columns from that SharePoint list, including the internal columns, and create an HTML table. Now, many a times you will not want all those columns, including the internal columns, to be a part of that HTML output that you're sending in the email. You have two options here. One is the get items action itself. You can limit the columns that are returned by view. So you can create a view in SharePoint for that specific list or library, and accordingly only have the columns that you're interested in exporting. Or instead of using columns automatic, I can change this to custom and define my own key value properties here. For example, task title. The value would be the title coming in from dynamic content of get items action. The ID of the task, that will be my ID column. The progress of the task. Progress in my case is a choice column, so I can pick progress value. And who the task is assigned to in my case is a person type column, so I can pick assigned to display name, and so forth. Once I have this HTML table generated, I can then go ahead and use the send an email V2 action from the Office 365 Outlook connector. Who do you want to send this email to? I want to send this to the input parameter that is being passed from PowerApps to Flow. To plug that in here, I will switch to advanced mode, and from dynamic content, I will pick mail to. The subject, I will plug in task data export. In the body of the email, I simply need to add the output of the create HTML table action. You can add style as well. For that, make sure you switch to the code view, and right here, I'll add my style. Can go to show advanced options, where I have additional properties that I can define for that email. One of them being the importance of the email. Maybe I'll set the importance of the email to high. This completes my flow. I will click on save. This will save my flow and connect it directly in my Power App. On select of my button, I would like to call that flow. My flow is called export tasks. I will use export tasks dot call the run method to run that flow. And that flow expects two parameters. The first one is the query that I would like to perform. My query I need to pass as a text. So in double quotes, I will be defining my query, which is starts with the title of the task. For now, I'm just hard coding the query, but we'll make this dynamic. Let's say I'm searching for task 4 in the title of that task. And that completes my first parameter. The second parameter is who do you want to send this email to? Here, I will send the email to the current user who's running the Power App. User.email will give me that information. And after the flow is called, I will use the notify function to notify the user that the export process has started, and you will receive an email once completed. The text that I've hard-coded here called task 4, this needs to come dynamically from this text box control. This text box control, I will copy its name, go back to the onSelect function, remove the hard-coded text, plug in a couple of double quotes, a couple of ampersands within it, and right in between the two ampersands, I will use that text box control dot text. Now if I preview my app, get me all the tasks where the title begins with task 3. I'll click export. This should go ahead and trigger my flow. If I head over to my mailbox, and here is the email that I have received. This shows me all the tasks that begin with the title task 3 from my entire data source. If you would like to also showcase the total count of the items, you can go back and edit the flow. And right above the HTML table, I can put count rows, use the expression length, and the parameter I will pick from dynamic content, the value from get items action. I'll click OK. I'll introduce a couple of line breaks, save my flow, close it. It will refresh the connection to Power Automate. And now if I click export, here is the email that I have received, and this also includes the total count. And here there are no limits. You can add as many filter criteria conditions you want. I will insert a drop-down control. The items for this, I will use choices function because I have a choice column in SharePoint for progress. From my SharePoint list, I will get the progress column choices. So this has loaded all my choices in here. I have renamed this drop-down control to DRP progress. I would like to apply this as well to filter the data in my gallery. So right here, I will add an AND condition. My column in SharePoint is progress. It's a choice column. So progress.value is equal to my drop-down control called DRP progress dot selected dot value. So if I preview this app, currently I have no items that begin with the task title task 3 and the progress has not started. Let's change it to in progress. I do have over 100 items. Let's change it to blocked. Now this is a dynamic query that the user is performing on the fly in PowerApps. Let's pass this to flow. And the beauty here is I don't have to change anything in flow. All I have to do is when I'm running the flow, I need to change my filter criteria. And here I will use AND, since I'm performing an AND operation with another query here, which is progress equal to, in single quotes, the value. And that value will come in dynamically from PowerApps. So same as before, 2 double quotes, 2 ampersands, and right in between, DRP progress dot selected dot value. If I preview the app, and if I click on export, my flow is triggered. This time the email that I receive only has 2 rows, and those are the ones that begin with task title task 3, and the progress is blocked. We'll go back to Power Automate inside PowerApps and edit the flow. Here, just like I created the HTML table, there is another action called create CSV table. It's a data operation. Very similar to what I did for create HTML table. From the value from the get items action, show advanced options, change this to custom, and I can pick any of my column values that I would like to add to my CSV table. To attach this CSV table data in the email, under show advanced options, we have attachments. Here, I will give my attachment a name, task export.csv. The attachment content would be the output of create CSV table. I will save my flow. I will close my flow. If I click export, this time the email that I receive will also include that attachment, which is the CSV file export of that dynamic data. To create a PDF file as well, I'll edit the flow. I will add a new step after create HTML table, add an action, use the create file action from the OneDrive for Business connector. The folder path, I will create it at the root of the user's OneDrive. This is the user who will be triggering the flow from PowerApps, which is the current user who's running the app. The name of the file here, it has to be unique. So I will use an expression. I'll use the GUID function dot HTML, and the content of the file would be the output of create HTML table. Next, I will add an action, convert file from OneDrive for business, the unique identifier of the file. This I will pick the ID dynamic content property from the create file action, and the target type here, I'll pick PDF. So I have the PDF file content that I would like to send as an attachment in the email. I already have my CSV attachment. I'll add another item here. This would be task report.pdf. That's the name of my file. And the content would come from the file content dynamic property of the convert file action. I will save my flow. I will close the flow. If I preview the app, let's change the query. Task 2 in progress. I'll click export. Here is the email that I have received. In this scenario, I have a lot of tasks that begin with the title task 2 and the status is in progress. A total of 223. If I look at the CSV data export, here is all that data. If I look at the PDF file that was exported, here is all that data. If you enjoyed this video, then do like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And thank you so much for watching.